Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unfiltered and Unapologetic, the space where we talk about healing, growth, mindset, spirituality, and the deeper work of becoming who we're meant to be without leaving our culture behind. I'm your host, Gil-Soto, born and raised in Lawrence, Massachusetts, raised between Bani and El Cibao, and proudly Dominicana. And today I want to talk about something I think a lot of people secretly struggle with, but don't always have the language for. Because we live in a culture that constantly tells people be more disciplined, work harder, stop procrastinating, stay consistent. And while discipline matters, I think sometimes we misunderstand what's actually happening underneath the surface. Because sometimes the issue is not laziness. Sometimes the issue is survival. Sometimes your body is exhausted. Your nervous system is overwhelmed. Your mind maybe has been carrying stress for so long that even simple things start feeling emotionally heavy. A lot of people learned how to function before they ever learned how to feel safe. And I think that's why so many people feel frustrated with themselves right now. They want consistency, peace, healing, and growth, but internally, their body still feels like it's surviving. And if that's the case, no amount of shame is going to fix it. That's why today's episode is called You Don't Need Motivation, You Need Safety. Because your inconsistency might not be laziness, it might be survival. I think one of the biggest misunderstandings happening online right now is that people assume every struggle is a mindset problem. And sometimes it is. But sometimes it's deeper than mindset. Sometimes your body genuinely does not feel safe. And when your nervous system does not feel safe, your body starts prioritizing protection over performance. This can look like procrastination, avoidance, shutting down, overthinking, freezing, starting things and not finishing them, wanting something so badly but feeling emotionally unable to move toward it. And the frustrating part is that people often judge themselves while this is happening. They start calling themselves lazy, undisciplined, weak, but many times what's actually happening is nervous system overwhelm. Your brain is trying to protect you from something it perceives as dangerous, and danger is not always physical. The body can interpret criticism, rejection, instability, pressure, burnout, emotional unpredictability, and even success itself as threats, especially if you grew up in environments where stress was constant. So later in life, even opportunities can start feeling emotionally overwhelming. Even visibility can feel dangerous. Even rest can feel uncomfortable. Because when someone spends years operating on survival mode, the body can become so used to stress that peace starts feeling unfamiliar. And this is why healing is not just mental. It's physical, it's emotional, spiritual too. Because survival mode disconnects people from themselves, and eventually exhaustion becomes normal. That's why I think some people don't need more shame or harsher self-talk. Sometimes they need regulation, rest, support, safety, because your body cannot create freely while it still believes it's preparing for danger. I have the first journal prompt here for you guys. Where in my life do I confuse survival mode with productivity? And the affirmation for this question is, I do not need to destroy myself to prove I am worthy of success. I think one of the saddest things about living in survival mode for too long is that eventually it stops feeling temporary. It starts feeling like who you are. You become the person who is always stressed, always overthinking, always emotionally preparing for something to go wrong. And after a while, your nervous system starts confusing struggle with identity. You start believing, this is how I am. I can't relax. I work better under pressure. But sometimes that's not your personality. Sometimes that's adaptation. And I think a lot of people don't realize how deeply survival mode affects the way they move through life. Because instead of asking, what do I actually want? People should start asking, what feels safest? What avoids criticism? What avoids disappointment? And that creates a life built around fear instead of alignment. And honestly, I had to confront this in my own life too. I remember moving into a calmer season emotionally and realizing I didn't even know how to relax. My body was so used to stress that peace almost felt uncomfortable, like I was waiting for something bad to happen. And that realization really stayed with me because I understood how deeply survival mode had shaped my nervous system. And I think a lot of people experience this without realizing it because when stress becomes familiar, peace can start feeling unnatural. And spiritually, I think this affects people deeply too because survival mode keeps people emotionally loud internally. It becomes harder to feel grounded, harder to trust, harder to feel connected to yourself, to peace, and even to God sometimes. That's why healing is not about only fixing yourself. Sometimes healing is teaching your body that life no longer has to feel like an emergency because not every dream is meant to cost your peace. I have another prompt here for you guys. What parts of my personality may actually be survival adaptations? And the affirmation for this question is, I am allowed to build a life that's peaceful, not just manageable. I think a lot of people don't realize that perfectionism is also a form of self-abandonment because when someone feels like everything has to be perfect before they move, they end up emotionally stuck, waiting for the right moment, the right version, the right wording, the right confidence, and meanwhile, life keeps moving. There are people with beautiful ideas, real talent, and meaningful dreams who never fully begin because they're trying to avoid discomfort or judgment. And honestly, I've had to work through this too. Even with podcasting, there were a few moments where I wanted to over-edit everything before I put it out. I wanted every detail to feel perfect at first. But eventually, I realized something. Perfection does not create connection. Honesty does. And many times, the things that help people the most are not perfect. They're real. Because perfectionism is often not excellence. It's fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being seen while still learning. But growth requires being willing to move before feeling fully ready. And spiritually, I think perfectionism disconnects people from trust too. Because perfectionism wants guarantees, control, certainty, but life does not work that way. Sometimes you have to trust yourself while you're still growing. Because if you keep waiting for perfection to begin, you may keep postponing the life you actually want to live. And I have another prompt here for you guys. What am I emotionally protecting myself from through perfectionism? And the affirmation for this question is, I release the belief that I must be perfect to be worthy of being seen. I think one of the biggest lies people have been taught is that consistency only comes from pressure. That if you criticize yourself enough, push yourself hard enough, or shame yourself enough, eventually you'll become disciplined. But honestly, I think sustainable consistency comes more from safety than fear. Because when people feel emotionally grounded, they move differently. They think more clearly, they trust themselves more, they stop wasting energy fighting themselves internally all day. And this is why nervous system healing matters so much. Because dysregulated nervous systems make everything heavier than it needs to be. But slowly, healing changes that. Not overnight, not perfectly, but gradually. You begin keeping small promises to yourself. You begin trusting your own decisions more. You begin realizing that peace does not make you weak. And eventually, consistency starts becoming less about survival and more about self-trust. Because fear can create temporary action, but safety creates sustainability. And spiritually, I think this matters too. Because many people are asking God for bigger lives while their body still believes expansion is dangerous. So healing becomes the process of teaching your mind, body, and spirit that it is finally safe to live differently. Safe to rest, safe to grow, safe to trust yourself, safe to stop surviving every moment of your life. And I think that's what I really want people to take from this episode. You are not weak because you're tired. You're not failing because you need rest. You're not lazy because your nervous system is overwhelmed. Sometimes your body is simply asking for the safety your mind has been denying it for years. And maybe healing is not becoming someone completely different. Maybe healing is finally becoming safe enough to be yourself. I have the last prompt here for you guys. What would change in my life if I stopped leading myself through fear? And the affirmation for this question is, I am building a life rooted in peace, trust, and emotional safety. So maybe you were never lazy. Maybe you were overwhelmed. Maybe your body adapted to survival for so long that peace started to feel unfamiliar. And healing is not about becoming perfect. Healing is about finally feeling safe enough to be yourself, because your nervous system affects more than productivity. It affects your peace, your relationships, your confidence, your spirituality, your ability to fully experience the life. And I think many people have spent so long trying to force themselves forward, when what they really needed was gentleness. Not everything heals through pressure. Some things heal through safety. So if you take anything from this episode, let it be this. Your inconsistency might not be laziness. It might be survival. It may be healing is not becoming someone completely different. Maybe healing is finally becoming safe enough to be who you already are. I have another prompt here for you guys. What would my life feel like if I stopped treating myself like a project that constantly needs fixing? And the affirmation for this question is, I am worthy of peace, rest, consistency, and success without abandoning myself in the process. Now let's end this episode with a prayer. So let's take a deep breath and put your hand on your chest. Dear God, help me release the belief that I have to stay exhausted to deserve rest. Calm the parts of me that are always waiting for something to go wrong. Bring peace to my mind, softness to my body, and clarity to my spirit. Teach me that rest is not weakness and healing does not make me less strong. Help me trust again. Help me trust peace again. Help me trust myself again. Little by little, help me feel safe being truly who I am. Amen. Thank you so much for being here with me for another episode on Unfiltered and Unapologetic. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who may need this reminder too. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, don't forget to leave a rating, review, or comment on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen. You can also explore my journals, digital guides, affirmation resources, and healing tools linked in the show notes. And remember, your body is not your enemy. Your exhaustion is not your identity. And your healing does not need to come through suffering. Until next time, be gentle with yourself, protect your peace, and stop confusing survival with who you are. I'll see you in the next episode.